At 20 years old, Jamie Vardy was nothing more than a hooligan playing Sunday League football with an ankle monitor on his feet. At 25 years old, he was just a full-time factory worker playing non-league football for Fleetwood Town. But within 3 more years, at 28 years old, Jamie Vardy would be lifting the Premier League title as he became the best striker in the entire country. But how on earth did he get there? How did this Sunday League hooligan, whose pre-match diet was a mix of beers and Red Bulls, go on to dominate the entire Premier League? Well, to understand how we got there, we have to go back to 1987, where life began for Jamie Vardy. He was born in Sheffield, but right from the start, the odds were stacked against him because when he was just an infant, his father walked out on him, leaving the family to struggle by themselves. Jamie grew up struggling in the neighborhood of Hillsborough, where he dreamed of playing for local club Sheffield Wednesday, and that dream looked like coming true when Sheffield Wednesday gave him a chance as a youth player. But then suddenly, Vardy's dream was cruelly snatched away from him aged 16 when Sheffield Wednesday released him for being too small, and it looked like his football career was over before it even got started, as Vardy quit football entirely, saying, "Everything I'd ever wanted had just been snatched away, and there was nothing to fill that huge void. I was lost." And to add insult to injury, he had a growth spurt just after being released, as he was now left with a feeling that he wasn't good enough. It was also around that time that he began to have many arguments with his mother and stepfather, which pushed Jamie to move out and start working odd jobs just to make ends meet. But it wouldn't be long before he stepped back onto the football pitch, because after a few months, he joined a local pub team before a friend helped him by getting him into Stocksbridge Park Steels, a tiny club in the 8th tier of English football, who have just over 100 supporters in a league where career-ending two-footed tackles were the norm. But Stocksbridge, like many of England's tiny clubs, also played in the preliminary rounds of the FA Cup, which would help Vardy achieve a rather unique record later in his career. Stocksbridge gave Vardy his first contract in football, paying him £30 a week, which barely pays for a night out in Sheffield. But Vardy says, "I'd never earned anything through football before, so I was happy to get that." But that money wouldn't go so far to make ends meet. Vardy had to work in a local carbon fiber factory, lifting heavy items into hot ovens, which was starting to damage his back, and things were about to get a whole lot worse for Vardy, as one night in Sheffield, he was drinking with a friend who had a hearing aid when some other men started mocking his friend, and Vardy got into a fight but got arrested and charged with assault, so the court ordered that he had to wear an ankle monitor and wasn't allowed out of his house at nighttime, which made playing football for Stocksbridge almost impossible, and in some games, he could only play the first half, then jump over a fence into a car waiting to get home before his 6 p.m. curfew. But Vardy said his ankle monitor was so strong that it actually protected him from bad tackles, and that assault charge ended up saving his career, because not long after, Vardy almost quit football entirely to join the army, but at the recruitment office, he had to admit to his criminal record, so he was denied from joining, which turned out to be a lucky break, as Vardy would soon start to get noticed, including in an FA Cup game where Stocksbridge lost 7-2, but Vardy was the best player on the pitch and was seen as a ridiculously fit, bullish, and confident player. Vardy would go on to score 55 goals in 115 games for Stocksbridge Park Steels, helping the team win promotion. And soon enough, other clubs began to be interested in Vardy, including nearby Halifax Town, who played in the same league but were a bigger club than Stocksbridge. But still, people warned Halifax's manager not to sign Vardy, saying he had a bad reputation, a criminal record, and a tendency to get red cards. But Halifax ignored all that advice and signed Vardy for £15,000. Now, Vardy thrived at Halifax, where he scored 25 goals and was named the team's player of the season as they won promotion, and it wasn't long before he was signed by Fleetwood Town for a club record fee of £150,000, which is 10 times what Halifax paid, and now Fleetwood were in the 5th tier of English football, and this was a massive step up. But some of the players couldn't understand why Fleetwood had signed Vardy, saying they'd never heard of him. But now that Vardy had quit his job, he could focus full-time on football for the first time in his life, and it showed, as he was the fittest and fastest player on the team, and his aggressive nature gave him the nickname the Cannon. But he still sometimes got into trouble, such as wrapping the physio's car in a cling film as a birthday present, and one time when he missed training, he had to do a naked run in the freezing cold. But his performances were starting to get him noticed by bigger sides, and after scoring one game, he replied to abusive opposition fans on Facebook with his no famous catchphrase, "Chat shit, get banged," and he just kept scoring, with football league teams now putting in huge bids for him, including Blackpool offering a crazy £750,000, but Fleetwood turned that bid down and wanted to keep their star striker. It was almost unfair on Fleetwood's opponents, as he smashed in 31 goals to help Fleetwood get get promoted. And now, at 25 years old, the then championship side Leicester City made a huge £1 million bid for him, which would be the record highest ever bid for a non-league player. So, just like that, Vardy made the move to the Football League at the age of 25 after spending his entire life in non-league. But whilst you know of the success Vardy had with Leicester, it wasn't easy at all. In fact, things were only getting tougher from here. But very quickly, I just want to ask you to subscribe. Thank you. Jamie Vardy started life at Leicester by scoring against Torquay United in the League Cup on his debut and would get 3 goals and 2 assists in his first 8 league games, but then he hit a massive loss in form, only scoring once more all season, getting dropped to the bench alongside a young striker called Harry Kane. Ever heard of him? At this time, Vardy was having a huge crisis in confidence. Fans were giving him abuse on social media, and Vardy was even thinking about giving up football. He said, "It was tough. I came into a dressing room with a lot of big names in, and I wasn't used to it whatsoever." Leicester's vice chairman even said that Vardy would go drinking every day and even turn up to training drunk. And one time he got injured with a dead leg, which wasn't getting better, so the physio asked Vardy about his habits, and he admitted that every night when he got home, he would mix Skittles candy with alcohol and drink it, which was stopping his leg from healing because his blood was basically all alcohol. He said he was struggling with not being the main man, so just went drinking and smoking with his mates instead and would stay up till 4 a.m. But despite all this, his head coach Nigel Pearson and assistant coach Craig Shakespeare never stopped believing in Vardy's talent, and even though Vardy was thinking of quitting football and becoming a nightclub rep in Ibiza, his coaches constantly told Vardy how good he could be, and these chats helped Jamie regain his confidence until he finally quit drinking booze and spent all summer working on his fitness. But going against your usual fitness advice, Vardy came up with the new routine of drinking 3 cans of Red Bull and a double espresso before each game, which made him run around like a nut job. But it paid off big time, as he scored 16 goals the following season and was named Players' Player of the Season as Leicester won promotion to the Premier League, which Vardy said was a dream come true, and that he had to pinch himself to remind him that it was real. But going from non-league to the Premier League is almost impossible, and it appeared to be a step too far for Vardy. And even though he had an incredible game against Manchester United, scoring 1 and getting 2 assists, as well as winning 2 penalties in September in a performance that shocked the football world, he wouldn't score another Premier League goal until March, as Leicester plummeted down the table to rock bottom with 9 games to go. And this is where the greatest story in football history truly begins. Leicester looked destined for relegation and couldn't win a single game until the last game of March. They looked dead and buried. But just in time, Vardy finally scored again, and although Leicester lost that match 4-3, Vardy refound his mojo, and Leicester won their next 4 games, with Vardy scoring a vital last-minute winner against West Brom, and then the only goal of the game against Burnley to pull Leicester up to 17th. But a loss against Chelsea in their next game put the pressure right back on. Leicester won 3 of their final 4 games to secure their spot in the Premier League in one of the most incredible survival stories in English history, becoming the first team ever to avoid relegation from the Premier League with less than 20 points from their first 29 games. Vardy finished that season with 5 Premier League goals, but his end-of-season form led to one of the highlights of any player's career, as just 3 seasons after playing in non-league, Vardy was called up to represent the England national team, with Roy Hodgson saying he had watched him since he was at Fleetwood Town. But Vardy's self-doubt started to creep in again, as he believed he wasn't good enough for England and almost didn't join up with the national team. But in the end, he showed up and he loved it. He fit in great, even giving Maguire his infamous nickname Slabhead, and that gave Vardy even more desire to show the world what he could do. But as he returned to Leicester that summer, the club would be plunged into turmoil, as after the season had finished, the manager Nigel Pearson was sacked, and without their talismanic head coach, Leicester were now favourites for relegation, especially when it was announced that their new head coach would be Claudio Ranieri, whose previous job saw him have a win percentage of 0 with the Greek national team. But even worse, Leicester lost its star player Esteban Cambiasso in the summer, while signing several unknown players like N'Golo Kante. So it was no surprise that Ranieri was predicted to be the first manager sacked that season, with the Guardian newspaper saying if they want someone to keep them in the Premier League, they may have gone for the wrong guy. But as you know, that next season, Jamie Vardy was about to have a party in the Prem. He started the season well, scoring Leicester's first goal of the 2015-16 season as they beat Sunderland 4-2. But after that, Vardy would blank against West Ham and Spurs, but he would score again in the next game with a late penalty against Bournemouth to start an incredible goal-scoring run, hitting the net against Villa and Stoke before his first Premier League double against Arsenal. Leicester lost that match, making it their first loss of the season, and many people thought their surprise good start was over, with the BBC saying they'd ridden their luck and had a leaky defense. After all, their chances of winning the Premier League title were 5,000 to 1, but Leicester won the next game against Norwich with Vardy scoring again despite having a broken wrist. And then he got another brace against Southampton to give him 9 goals in 9 games, but his goal-scoring run just wouldn't stop, and his goal in the next game against Crystal Palace made him only one of 3 Premier League players to score in 8 Premier League games in a row. And now everybody was taking notice of Jamie Vardy and wondering how long he could keep scoring for. But in his next game against West Brom, Vardy went down injured, and it looked like his run would end. But after lengthy treatment, he returned to the game and scored moments later with a 77th minute goal before making it 10 games in a row by scoring a penalty against Watford, equaling the record held by Ruud van Nistelrooy. And Vardy went one further to claim the record for himself in the next game before scoring against Manchester United to mean he had scored for 12 Premier League games in a row. And while his run had to end sometime, his blank in the next game didn't stop Leicester from winning 3-0 and going to the top of the Premier League table in what was shaping up to be the most impossible season in football. But still, everybody expected their incredible run to end soon, with lifelong Leicester fan Gary Lineker even promising to present Match of the Day in his underwear if Leicester won the league, saying that there was zero chance that they would win. But even though a small blip a few games later dropped them down to second, they just kept winning and regained top spot in January, leading people to start suggesting Leicester's season would be made into a movie, with Claudio Ranieri suggesting Vardy would be played by Robert De Niro. And around this time, Vardy would score his first goal for England in a 3-2 win against Germany, as well as scoring this absolutely insane volley against Liverpool. Absolutely unstoppable. But despite the pressure of actually having a chance to win the league, Leicester would hold on to the top spot, and in April, Vardy scored 3 more key goals until his hothead attitude saw him sent off against Swansea for diving. But Leicester kept holding on until the start of May, when they drew with Manchester United and would be confirmed as Premier League champions as long as the team in second didn't win. But luckily for Leicester, the team in second was Tottenham Hotspur, so there was no doubt at all. So Vardy held a watch party at his house as Spurs predictably bottled it and failed to beat Chelsea. So Leicester won the title and completed the most incredible season in Premier League history, winning the title by 10 points, with Vardy scoring 24 goals and getting 6 assists. And due to his incredible season, Vardy was aimed as the Premier League Player of the Season and even came 8th in the voting for the Ballon d'Or, which was the best performance by an Englishman for 10 years and an insane achievement for someone who had been playing almost amateur football a few years before. Now, after this season, it was no shock that the Leicester team was going to get raided by the bigger clubs, and unsurprisingly, everyone wanted to sign Vardy, with Arsenal making a huge offer of £22 million that triggered Vardy's release clause. But Jamie Vardy remembered how Leicester stuck by him in the toughest of times and rejected Arsenal, and that season he even scored for Leicester in the Champions League quarter-final and would score this wonder goal that even Dennis Bergkamp would be proud of, and was named BBC Goal of the Season. But Leicester would sell other stars like Riyad Mahrez and N'Golo Kante and would fall down the league. And then they would hire Claude Puel as head coach, but he soon decided Vardy was the problem, deciding to drop Vardy, which enraged Leicester fans and caused Vardy's wife to like a bunch of tweets criticizing the head coach's tactics. But Vardy was now in his 30s, and some pundits were suggesting he was too old for the Premier League. But soon enough, Puel was sacked, and new boss Brendan Rodgers would believe in him, and then Vardy did something incredible that proves he wasn't just a one-season wonder. Aged 33, he scored an incredible 23 goals in the 2019-20 season, including his 100th Premier League goal, and was named the top scorer in the Premier League, making him the oldest player to win the Premier League Golden Boot. And the next year, Leicester City reached the FA Cup final, meaning that Vardy was the first player ever to play in every single round of the competition, including all the preliminary rounds when he was at Stocksbridge. And of course, Leicester won the FA Cup that season, making for yet another historic achievement for a player who was playing amateur football not too long before. Today, Vardy sits at 38 years old, still playing for Leicester City, as he refused to leave the club that believed in him when nobody else did. Now, if you think Jamie Vardy is a football legend, subscribe. And if you want to see an even better video than this one, click the one on screen now.